Sometimes I think about how we're all kind of standing at the edge of this huge, unknown territory.
It's like that feeling you get when you're about to do something totally new and kind of scary, right?
Exactly. It could be anything, like starting a business,
Going back to school,
writing a
or
book.
even just like trying a new hobby.
Yeah. And there's this part of us that gets super excited about the possibilities.
All the potential.
But then there's this other part, the part that's all like, hold on a second. What if you totally mess this up?
Yeah, what if it doesn't work out?
What if you fail?
And that fear can be paralyzing.
Totally. It's so sneaky, too, because it can disguise itself as all sorts of things.
Like procrastination.
Perfectionism.
Or even just feeling like you're not ready.
Exactly. But deep down, it often boils down to that fear of not being good enough.
And honestly, that fear is so ingrained in our culture.
It's like we're conditioned to see failure as this horrible, shameful thing.
Something to be avoided at all costs.
Right. But what if we could change that narrative?
What if instead of fearing failure, we could see it as this incredible opportunity for growth?
That's what we're diving into today.
We're talking about how to reframe our relationship with failure
How to embrace those inevitable stumbles.
and how to use them as fuel to propel us forward.
And I think a great place to start is by acknowledging that everyone experiences this fear. It's not just you.
You are not alone in this.
I remember when I was first starting out with my YouTube channel.
Oh, tell me about it. I think everyone who's ever put themselves out there online has felt that fear.
Right. It was terrifying. I mean, what if people hated my videos? What if I looked awkward on camera?
Those are my biggest fears, too.
It was a constant battle with my inner critic.
Oh, tell me about it. That inner critic can be so loud sometimes.
It can be brutal. But I eventually realized that I had to push past those fears.
So how did you do it? What helped you take that leap?
Honestly, part of it was just forcing myself to hit that publish button, even when every fiber of my being was screaming at me to stop.
I feel that. Sometimes you just gotta go for it.
Right, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, even if it feels scary and uncomfortable.
And that's such a crucial part of this whole process.
It's about recognizing that discomfort is often a sign that you're growing,
That you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
which is where the magic happens.
Totally. It's like if you're not feeling at least a little bit uncomfortable, you're probably not challenging yourself enough.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about success.
It's not about being perfect or having it all figured out from the start.
It's about being willing to learn and grow along the way.
To embrace those stumbles and use them as fuel to keep going.
And that's a perfect example of what we call a growth mindset. It's this belief that your abilities aren't fixed, that you can actually improve through effort and learning.
So instead of saying, I'm terrible at video editing, someone with a growth mindset would say, I'm learning how to edit videos, and I'm going to keep practicing until I get better.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about a growth mindset is that it allows you to see those so-called failures not as setbacks, but as opportunities to learn and grow. Each mistake becomes a stepping stone on the path to mastery.
And it takes the pressure off needing to be perfect right out of the gate.
Totally. Which
Yeah.
is so freeing. It's like you're giving yourself permission to experiment, to make mistakes, and to learn from those experiences.
And speaking of taking the pressure off, another thing that can really help is building a support system.
Oh my gosh, yes. Having people in your corner who get it, who believe in you, and who are there to cheer you on can make all the difference.
It's like having your own personal cheerleading squad.
For real. Like, I joined a bunch of online communities when I was first starting out.
Me too.
And it was so helpful to connect with other creators who were going through similar struggles. We could share our experiences, both the wins and the fails.
It normalizes the whole process, right? You realize that everyone makes mistakes, everyone has those moments of self-doubt, and you're not alone in this crazy journey.
Exactly. It's like having a tribe of people who get it, who've been there, and who can offer support and encouragement when you need it most.
And that's something we all need, especially when we're pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones and trying new things.
Totally, because let's face it, doing anything worthwhile is going to involve some level of risk.
And with risk comes the possibility of failure.
But that doesn't mean we should let fear hold us back.
It just means we need to reframe how we view failure.
And that's what we're going to keep exploring in this deep dive.
We're going to talk about practical strategies for overcoming that fear.
We're going to share personal stories about times we've stumbled and how we've gotten back up.
And we're going to remind you that failure is not the enemy.
It's a teacher,
It's an opportunity.
and it's a crucial part of the journey.
So stick with us because this is going to be a good one.
It is.
You know, I think A lot of times we get so caught up in the fear of what might happen that we forget to actually like enjoy the
Oh,
process.
totally. It's like
Yeah.
we're so focused on the destination that we miss all the beautiful scenery along the way.
Right. And that can make the whole journey feel really stressful and overwhelming.
It's like we're constantly in this fight or flight mode, bracing ourselves for the worst possible outcome.
And when you're in that state of mind, it's almost impossible to be creative and innovative and truly enjoy what you're doing.
So how do we shift out of that fear-based mindset
Hmm.
and into a more like joyful and expansive way of approaching our goals?
Well, one thing that I found really helpful is practicing mindfulness.
Mindfulness, like
Yeah.
meditation and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's about being present in the moment, paying attention to your thoughts and feelings without judgment, and just like noticing what's happening in your body and your mind.
So it's not about like trying to get rid of those negative thoughts or pretend they don't exist, but more about just acknowledging them and letting them pass through.
Exactly. It's like saying, hey, fear, I see you there. I know you're trying to protect me, but I'm going to be okay. I've got this.
I love that. It's like we're having a conversation with our fear instead of letting it control us.
And the more you practice mindfulness, the more you realize that those fears are just thoughts. They're not reality. They're just stories that our minds are telling us.
And we have the power to choose whether or not we believe those stories.
Exactly. We can choose to let those stories run the show and paralyze us, or we can choose to acknowledge them, thank them for their input, and then move forward anyway.
And I think that's where the real magic happens, right? When we step outside of our comfort zones and take action despite our fears.
Because that's how we grow, that's how we learn, that's how we discover our true potential.
And it's also how we create some of the most amazing experiences in our lives.
Oh, absolutely. Like, think about all the incredible things you've accomplished in your life, the things you're most proud of.
I bet most of those things involved some level of risk, some level of uncertainty, and probably even some fear along the way.
But you did it anyway. And look at you now.
Right? It's like the things that scare us the most are often the things that are most worth doing.
Because they challenge us to grow, they push us outside of our comfort zones, and they ultimately help us become the best versions of ourselves.
And I think that's something we often forget when we're so focused on avoiding failure.
We forget that failure is actually a necessary part of the growth process.
It's like you can't have success without also having some setbacks along the way.
Right. It's like learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall a few times before you get the hang of it.
But each time you fall, you learn something new. You adjust your balance, you try a different approach, and eventually you're riding down the street with the wind in your hair.
And you feel so proud of yourself for not giving up.
Exactly. And that feeling of accomplishment, that sense of pride in yourself for overcoming those challenges, that's what makes it all worthwhile.
And it's a feeling that you can only get by embracing the possibility of failure and being willing to put yourself out there.
So the next time you're feeling that fear creeping in, try to remember that it's not the enemy. It's just a sign that you're on the right track.
You're doing something that matters to you,
You're challenging yourself to grow.
and you're creating a life that's truly your own.
And I think that's pretty amazing, don't you?
I do. I really do. As we're talking about all of this and all these different ways to like reframe failure and really sort of change our relationship with it, I've been thinking a lot about how our perception of time plays into all of this.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, like, do you mean, are we worried about not achieving things fast enough or like that we're running out of time to like make our dreams happen?
I think that's definitely part of it, but it's also about how we view setbacks in the grand scheme of things. You know, like, do we see a failure as this permanent roadblock? Or is it more like a temporary detour?
Oh, well, that's such a good distinction. Because, yeah, if you're operating from that permanent roadblock mentality,
Mm.
every little stumble is going to feel like the end of the world.
Right. It's like you hit a dead end and you just assume that's it. There's no way forward. But what if instead we could see those setbacks as opportunities to pause, reassess, and maybe even discover a more scenic route?
Ooh, I love that.
Mm.
Like, it's not the end of the journey. It's just a little detour that might even lead to something even better than what we had originally planned.
Exactly. And I think that shift in perspective can make a huge difference in how we experience those inevitable bumps in the road.
So how can we, like, practically apply this detour mentality to our lives? How can we reframe those setbacks in a way that feels less daunting and more like, an adventure?
Well, one thing that's helped me is to think of my life as a series of chapters. There are going to be chapters that are exciting and full of joy. And then there are going to be chapters that are more challenging, maybe even painful.
But each chapter contributes to the overall story. Right.
Exactly. It's like a good book. You need those moments of tension and conflict to make the story interesting and to help the characters grow.
And to make those happy moments even sweeter.
Totally. So when you hit a setback, try to see it as just the beginning of a new chapter. It's
Yeah.
not the end of the book, it's just a turning point that might lead to something even more amazing.
I love that. It's like we're the authors of our own stories, and we get to decide how those setbacks shape our narratives.
And that's a really empowering thought, right?
It is, because it reminds us that we have the power to choose how we respond to those challenges.
And that's what ultimately determines our success. Not the setbacks themselves, but how we choose to learn and grow from them.
So I guess the key takeaway here is that failure is not the opposite of success. It's a part of success.
It's a stepping stone,
Yeah.
it's a teacher, and it's an essential part of the journey.
This whole conversation has been so insightful and inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your stories with us today. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
It's been an absolute joy. I always love these deep dives with you. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us today.
We hope this conversation has helped you reframe your relationship with failure and inspired you to embrace those inevitable stumbles as opportunities for growth.
Remember, you are not alone in this journey. We all face challenges. We all make mistakes. And we all have those moments of self-doubt.
But we also have the incredible power to overcome those challenges, learn from our mistakes, and emerge from those experiences even stronger and more resilient than before.
So go out there, embrace the unknown, challenge yourself to step outside of your comfort zone, and celebrate every step you take on this incredible journey called life.
That's it for this episode of Life Unfiltered. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that matters to you. Until then, take care and keep living life to the fullest.